business using real, raw, and 100% no bullshit proven tactics. My name is Ivan Temelkov, and I'm your host. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a special guest joining me on the podcast today by the name of Rose Young. Hi, Rose. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into a convo with Rose, I want to tell you a little bit about Rose and her background. She is an empowerment trauma life coach. Her background was in the health field, a cardiology technologist. She's also an author, a visionary compiler of a book called Broken Trust Stories of Empowerment in Relationships, Finance, and Wellness. And she's also a co-author in an upcoming book titled "Pursued by Purpose." So, before we jump into talking about the book, and I'm excited to hear more about that. Let's start with kind of telling you a little bit more of a comprehensive version of your story. Tell us a little bit about your background, your upbringing, where you've been, what you've seen, and kind of what led you up to becoming an empowerment trauma life coach.
Okay, yeah. First of all, I'm living in Canada, Ontario, Canada, and my career background, is in cardiology. And cardiology was and is a great field. I enjoyed working in cardiology. However, based on a traumatic experience that I had in first a car accident that stopped me and from working into the cardiology field, then I was compelled actually to move into a different field. While I was recovering from the first accident, I became a victim again in another car accident. So that led me to basically give up cardiology and start a new career, which is in empowerment and trauma life coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So let me ask you this: when you went through your first traumatic experience with the car accident, post accident, what were some of the things that were going through your mind? I'm curious from a mental standpoint. I'm curious to know what were you thinking. Did you start thinking about a strategy of how you wanted to what you wanted to learn from that experience?
Yeah, what I wanted to learn from the experience was growing and becoming, like healing from that.
Mm-hmm.
How was I going to be able to grow from that experience? What was I going to learn from that experience? And being in that experience taught me a lot. It actually taught me about myself and what's valuable in life, what's important in life, and what our
Mm-hmm.
priorities are. So, to answer your question, basically, I just wanted to get an experience of overcoming and healing from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I asked this question is, as human beings, which, human centricity is a huge part of something that I've been pursuing of both from a life and a business standpoint. But I think when people suffer traumatic experiences, they always look at, the downside of traumatic experiences, right? So a car accident, which, nobody wants to ever experience that because you don't know what the outcome of it is. But if
Mhm.
you survive that kind of a traumatic experience, you suddenly realize it's almost like you have an epiphany and realize that, what, I'm capable of so much more. And then you start to think, was there a necessity for a traumatic experience to sort of create a rejuvenating mindset and remind me of the fact that, what, there's more to life, and I've just been nibbling in this, very little, because the reality of things is most people create a comfort zone that they like to live in, and that they do certain things. They got daily habits, maybe they work out or they go to their job, they see family, whatever, routines, and they're okay with that. And then when a disruption happens, like a traumatic event, then suddenly it's almost like an enlightenment. It makes them realize that, what, I'm capable of so much more. And you know what? My days are numbered because in the reality of things, all of our days are numbered. Okay.
Definitely.
I mean, we're all, cut from the same cloth, and all of our days are numbered. So what I want to know is, after this post traumatic experience, what were some specific things that you were thinking about, right? So, like as you were recovering, what was going through your head? What kind of realizations did you have? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, like one of my saying and my philosophy is you're bigger than your present. So in that specific time, actually in that specific moment when it happened, everything ran through my mind as what now? Like, first of all, why did it happen? Right? And then you go through that experience of now you're taken out of your comfort zone and you have to meet these challenges that you're faced with. So basically what was going to my mind is the future. What is my life after this going to look like, right? You start thinking about family. You start thinking about your job that you had. You start thinking about the life that you had. Is it going to be? Are you going to be able to go back to it? Or are you going to be able to continue? Or are you going to be able to fit other stuff in, like other jobs and other people, and like what is it going to be like? So a lot of things were going through my mind at that time. How do I deal with this? And that was the biggest thing I was dealing with. I was really struggling about moving forward. How do I move forward from this accident? How do I move forward into the future? What is my future like? What is it going to look like? So I was thinking about those things. Yes.
So there were a lot of questions that were going through your mind,
Yeah.
obviously. What I'm curious knowing is, typically in those kinds of, tragic situations, that when you experience something that's very traumatic, was it, when you think back, was it more as you were recovering? Was it physical pain? Was it emotional pain? Was it both? That you were experiencing? What did that feel like?
Oh, in my situation, it was both mentally and physically, and even spiritually, because I was thinking at that moment that I'm going through all this pain. Like, why did it happen? And the pain that I was getting physically was causing me mental issues as well, because, like when you're going through something physical, it becomes a strain on your mental ability to focus, to think straight, to think in the now, because like you're thinking what happened in the past. You're thinking about what my future is going to be like. You're thinking about pain. You're thinking about medication. You're thinking about how do I get over this. So it affects you in all areas of your life, both like mentally and physically.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask that question is because, I think everyone kind of goes through a different experience. Post traumatic is, I think it's usually a combo of both. So, as your experience, this first car accident, obviously you had a lot of questions. You were looking for a lot of answers. You were seeking guidance. On where do I go from here? How do I deal with this? How does this impact my life? So, you obviously found answers to some of those questions, for the time being. But then you encounter another car accident,
Yes.
right? So what I'm curious in knowing is, I mean, when something traumatic happens once, it takes time to recoup. But then when you experience something of the similar magnitude, how did that affect you?
Wow. That had a great impact on my life. It actually make you rethink everything, because when the first one happened, you had to deal with the first one, right? So I had to deal with the first one, and during my recovery from the first one, the second one happened. So now it was like a double portion, right?
Right.
And then you have to recover all over again. But when the second one happened, based on everything that I had gone through with the first one, I had some sense of guidance and some sense of acceptance, actually, that it happened and I have to deal with it. So I had a better understanding and a better idea of how I was going to deal with the second one, because the first one is like it paved the way, if I might say so. Again, like
Are you still there?
and use um, whatever experience I had in the first one and getting over the first one, I can also put it towards the second one, like the strategies for the first one, I can put the second one, and then go from there. So it wasn't as bad to get over.
I see. I see. You broke up there for maybe about 20 seconds, I think,
Ooh,
roughly.
ooh,
So that's okay. Technology,
sorry.
technology doesn't always play nice, but the one thing that you mentioned there towards the end is you said, you used the same strategies, as the first time around when you went through this first car accident. So would you say that the second time around it was a little bit easier to maybe mitigate that emotional, spiritual, physical pain that you had endured?
Yes, it was. It was.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've gone through, two car accidents. You have obviously, re had to rethink everything. So what were some of the biggest takeaways for you? If you were to think back, prior to your two car accidents, you know, do you like what were some of the takeaways that you can remember that you are now applying in your life and in your business moving forward?
Okay, so one major thing that I did in order for me to even get to this point was I journaled, right? So journaling was one of my big thing. I write everything down. I write when I was upset, I wrote it down. When I was happy, I wrote it down. So I journal every single day, right? And what one thing I also developed was a thank you list. So at one point I was very depressed and I was wondering like why is this happening? But then I looked around and I thought to myself, okay, I need to be thankful for something. So I started writing a thank you list and it just became a habit, which I
Mhm.
actually do now. Like I give thanks for little things, just
Sure.
waking up, just having, meal on my table. I actually make a thank you list. So I took that away. I also journaled. I also learned to forgive. That's another thing too. When the first accident happened, I was blaming everybody. I wasn't able to go back to work for a
Yeah.
while. I blamed my boss. I was in pain. I blamed the people who were in the other cars. I blamed the whole world for everything I was going through. And one thing I learned is that when you forgive, you're able to move on. It might not happen right away, but like once you're starting to say, well, take responsibility for whatever you need to take responsibility for, and then you have to forgive the other people that's involved in whatever situation, whatever events that happened in the past. That
Sure.
helps you to move on into the future. So I took away those things, which I also applied to my everyday life now, like the journaling, the thank you list, forgiving. I incorporate all those into my everyday life.
You said something there that I just wanted to touch upon real quick is that you said that prior to your first car accident, I believe, that you were blaming everyone for your own mistakes, for your own shortcomings, because you felt that, you probably felt that by blaming others, that would give you some comfort, that would give you some closure. And it's not just you. It's actually a vast majority of people, believe it or not, because how many times have you seen someone, blame something that they did on someone else? And
Yeah.
it has to do with lack of accountability. It's lack of responsibility because as human beings, we're imperfect. I, of all people, tell people I'm imperfect. In
Oh
fact,
yeah.
I fail more and more times every single day than I can count on both hands. And here's the reality of things: when you start to take responsibility for your actions, when you start being accountable, and don't blame others, because the reality of things, you are where you are in life and in business, mainly because of the choices you made, the
True.
actions that you took. You
True.
know, it had nothing to do with other people. And so, to your point, is that it's not just you. A vast majority of the human population, and even entrepreneurs in business, always try to blame someone else, for their own mistakes because it's easier to do it that way. because they don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to be accountable. Now, when you start being accountable and taking responsibility for your own actions, good ones and bad ones, and your shortcomings
Yeah.
also, and that's when your life actually drastically starts to change. And from what I heard you say, you sort of had this mental shift, sort of like an enlightenment, a spiritual guidance to help you realize
Yeah.
you went through this, and it's kind of like, you know what, if there's anything that I learned from this traumatic experience, is that, to own my shit, basically,
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
my shit and stop blaming everybody else for the things that I didn't do, or things that I did and didn't pan out the way I had hoped. So you have a book called Broken Trust Stories of Empowerment in Relationships, Finance, and Wellness. Let's talk a little bit about that book. Tell us a little bit about the book. What inspired you to write the book?
Okay, so that book was birthed from everything I went through from the accidents, the
Mm-hmm.
about accident actually. So while I was going through the recovery portion of my accident, I had so many broken trusts. Okay, and I know people can relate to this because sometimes when you're going through stuff, when you're going through specific events and experiences that are not very pleasant to others, right? They kind of walk away from you or they take
Right.
disadvantage of you. So I've experienced it in my relationships where people were like walking away. People didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to help me do anything. So instead of being there just as a listening ear, they, took advantage. They walked away or something. I had it in finance where, it was a two major accident that interrupt my life financially as well. So that's the broken trust there. And then we had what was the next one? Wellness. So wellness was the pain, the physical pain that I was feeling. And I
Mm-hmm.
started out writing a solo book, which I'm still like in the process of writing. But I started off writing a solo book. And then while I was writing, first of all, I was writing when I just started it from a place of hurt. So I was writing, and I was blaming, and I was complaining. And then I caught myself, like I read it over and I'm like, wow,
Right.
this is not going to help anybody, right? This is just me complaining. So I rethink and I regrouped and I decided to do an anthology. An anthology now is different people who have gone through brokenness and then they themselves overcame it. So then their story can help others heal or become inspired or something. So I got a few people, well, there's like 30 people, including myself, 31 people in the book, and we all share our stories of inspiration. Like, there's a real stories, true stories that people had gone through and then they overcame. And then what I
Right.
did was I put all these stories together and we had an anthology called Broken Trust. But the Broken Trust, we give a glimpse of the brokenness and then we give inspirational information where people can use it to become inspired and empowered. Yeah, so that's how that book was birthed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Very cool. I mean, these are, the title of the book is, a very relevant title because, relationships, finance, and wellness are actually the top three things that most human beings struggle in. Relationships wise, we all struggle in relationships, whether it's in our personal lives or in business.
yeah.
There's the epicenter is relationships. And then, finance. I mean, I will tell you this: there's been a lot of people I have gone through this podcast in 6 years, and there's one thing that I've learned is just that whether you're at the bottom or you're at the top, you're always going to have finance problems. In fact, when you're at the top,
Definitely.
you
Yeah,
finally get to where you want to be, you're going to have more finance problems than you've ever had before. So learning how to manage those, and then wellness, is a really big one, especially for me. I'm someone who, for instance, I've been a cyclist for 8 years now, and I even talked a little bit about that earlier this morning in today's podcast episode, and talked about how in the first couple of years of my journey, of my cycling journey, it was more about fitness, really. And then after, so this was 2013 through 2015. And then since 2015,
Yeah.
2016, so for the last 5, 6 years, it's really been more about, mind therapy and personal development and enlightenment, so to speak. I mean, still fitness related, but it has
Yeah.
really taken on a different form. And so I talk a lot about mind, body, and soul, which really kind of encompasses that wellness
Yeah.
because, you got to have those three things, so relationships, finance, and wellness that you talk about in your book are all essential things that, every human being needs to find ways to mitigate, how to call it balance. If there's, a balance, to be able to balance those things to live, an abundant life.
Yeah.
So that's great that you were able to tackle that because I know it relates to a lot of people out there. That's a completely different story of how people actually execute on these things because
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
people, they know that they struggle in relationships and finance and wellness. It's just most people are unwilling to change any
To
of
change.
those things,
Yes. Yeah.
and take action against those things. So one other thing, that I want to talk about now that we mentioned, your two car accidents, the book that you've written is that, one of the things that I want to get your take on is talk about detachment and letting go of the past.
Okay.
So, your past was different prior to the car accident. Your
Yes.
past was different prior to the book. So let's
Yeah.
talk about detaching, letting go of your past, and how have you tackled that, and how has it changed your life?
Okay. So, um, back to the past. Okay, I will just say this part first, and then go back. Okay. So what I want to touch on right now is detachment. The word detachment. Okay. So after the car accident, I am going to go back there because that's kind of just enlightened me. After the car accident, I learned a lot about myself and about things. So I realized that I was very upset about losing my, right? And the word my is I'm attaching myself to certain things. For example, my job, my car, right? My house, my friends, right? My. So what I what I started to do, and this is just my thing, I started to do, instead of saying my job, I
Mhm.
detach myself and I say the job, the car, instead of saying my, because when you attach yourself to certain things, then it becomes a part of your being, right?
Right.
So as you learn to like let go of these things, you have to detach your physical self from it, your mental self from it. That's why I wanted to touch about the detachment part, because when you detach yourself, you have to detach your whole self. So my
Mhm.
job was not my job, it became the job, the car, right? Because I was crying about,
Yeah.
oh yeah, do you understand what I'm trying to say here, right? So
Yeah,
that,
one thing actually I wanted to mention since you're talking about detachment here,
yeah,
you said job.
yeah,
Now, a lot of things that you actually listed out are, believe it or not, materialistic things that most
yeah,
people think that, they're requirements for them to be able to live their life. So, there was something that, I mean, there's multiple studies out there, but since we were talking about job, is most people compare losing their job to the next closest thing to death
yes,
because they feel that if I lose my job, I don't have any money, I can't support myself. And what's really interesting that you said is that you kind of did that when you said you replace my with the, but what you did mentally is basically you change your perception and outlook on those things,
mhm,
right?
you're right.
So keep going about detachment. I mean, that completely made sense. I just wanted to touch upon the job thing because we're seeing rise of entrepreneurs left and right, mainly because more and more people are finding out that, what, losing my job maybe is one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and in regards to that too, a job does not really define who you are. It's what you do, and I had to learn that. And I actually knew that. It's just it came to a realization, right? that these things are materialistic things, and I don't necessarily need to attach myself to them in order for
Right.
me to move on, right? And so that's one part of the one point of detachment that I incorporate
Right.
again into my life, where I try to move on into the future without attaching myself to everything that I've lost in the past.
Yeah. Well, speaking of detachment, you brought up a very interesting thought that I actually wanted to share too. Is that for the last 50 years, probably, maybe even longer than that, in the United States, there's sort of been that traditional mindset of the way that, you know, uh, we as humans need to live our lives, right? So you're being told that, you know what, you go to school, you get your degree, you get a full time job, you make some money, hopefully you can pay all your bills, hopefully you can put some money aside,
Yeah.
and then you die, basically. Like that was sort of the traditional path. And
Yes.
over the last, I would probably say, well, since the birth of the internet, really, so early 90s, I would say, the internet just completely changed the way, people are going about, living their lives. The internet has created opportunities for people and has also changed, the perception of how you should live a life. So suddenly, like you were saying, is detaching from the traditional mentality of, you know what, maybe this job is not a good fit for you. Like you said, it's something that you do, but it's not something that you're married to. And most people think, even nowadays, there's a lot of people out there. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
80% of Americans think that they're married to their job.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
married to their job. And so, when you sort of go through, and there's so many repercussions of this, right? Is this that, so when you go through the mental shift like you did, you're detached from a lot of things, including, not my job, it's the job, which it's just a job. It's not your
Yes.
job,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
just a job, right? And really having that epiphany of that, you know what, I can always find another job, but you know what? Why don't I find something that I truly enjoy doing? Why don't I
Yeah.
find something that I have real purpose behind? Something that's going to give me fulfillment. Because you know what? Most people are afraid of that. They're afraid of it is because they look at everything from a monetary standpoint. And they're unwilling to detach because they think that as long as there's a monetary value and it's
Yeah.
consistent, that that's the only way that they can live their lives,
True. Yeah.
right? Because let's
Agree.
face it, losing the job and finding something that you are truly passionate about. So, becoming an empowerment trauma life coach as a
Yeah.
result of your traumatic experiences. If those traumatic experiences hadn't happened, you probably wouldn't have been in the position that you're in now.
Yes. Totally agree. Totally agree. And
Right.
that job from before is like a comfort zone. Like when you have something, it's a total. It's everything is all routine and everything is all fixed and everything is all scheduled, right? So now when you have an interruption, then it becomes a big problem, right? And it's really
Right.
hard to move away from that because it's like, okay, you get this certain amount of money every so often. You have a certain time when you get up, you go to this job, you finish this time, or whatever it is. There's a routine and it's a set scheduled that you're
Right.
programmed to do, right?
Right.
So when that becomes interrupted by whatever events or somebody or something, then it becomes a problem, right? So if
Right.
you change your mindset, which is what I did, you change your mindset and start looking for different solution, different jobs, as we're talking about, buy another car like I had to do, right?
Right.
Then things are different, right? And then you might even get a better job, you might even get a better car, you might even get a better whatever it is that you're looking after, right? And not only that, in the process, you might find what your purpose is, your purpose, right? Because every
Right.
one of us have a specific purpose, I believe, that we're meant to serve or we're meant to do while we're here on earth. And if you don't know what that purpose is, you are just living in default. You're doing these jobs, but you don't really like it. You're just doing it for the money, or you're just
Yep.
doing it to. So I look at it like when things happen, you have to acknowledge that it happened, right? and then you have to move on. You have to detach. You can't go back. Really,
Right. Right.
we're meant to move forward. You know, it's not like we can go back like from yesterday and said, okay, I'm going to go back and live in yesterday. It happened. Yesterday's done. We can't go back. So we just have to
Mhm.
move forward. And how are we going to move forward if we're stuck in one place, if we're stationary, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent point. And actually that's a really good segue to the next topic I wanted to chat with you about, which is about self-control.
Yeah.
One of the things that you had mentioned, in your bio is that you are really good at being able to stay calm. So I want to get your take on, so how do you exercise self-control, especially in, tedious and very, high tension situations? Like, was it something that you learned after your accident? Or was it something that you were naturally gifted as, in your life?
I think I was naturally gifted.
Mhm.
However, I didn't really practice it, right? Because sometimes when people are like, like getting excited around you, you seem to
Right.
like follow the crowd. So whatever they're doing, you're doing it, right? They're like screaming, you're screaming. They're calm, you're calm, right? But
Right.
I
Right.
think like each of us, this is my opinion, of course. Each of us is given like the sixth sense. So each of us have these ability to do stuff, but until stuff happened to us, we don't really exercise them. So, like again, back to the car accident, right?
Yeah.
I started exercising these things because I needed to calm myself because when it just happened, my blood pressure was over the roof, right? I
Yeah.
panicked, like and everything like that. But after it happened, especially of the second one, then I had to learn to control my feelings, my emotions. And as human beings, we live and we operate on our emotions. So I had to learn again to control myself, my emotion, and everything that's going on around me. Because if I didn't, then I would lose total control of everything, right? I
Yeah.
would be, yeah.
Well,
So
you hit the nail on the head there, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. Is so the ability to stay calm and exercise self control is a matter of, like you said, the ability to control your feelings and emotions. And this is such a top topic because in life and in business specifically, well, in business, people buy based on emotions.
yeah,
The way that they're expressing themselves towards something. I use this poor analogy of, let's say you have $100, right? And that's all the money that you got. And you see these shiny sneakers, a lot of guys are, high tops and stuff. And they see like the new Air Jordans or something. They're like, oh my God, I love those shoes, right? So suddenly you go through, and this is literally how big brands have learned to market and appeal to customers, since an early days, knowing that you might be broke, right?
yeah, yeah,
And or might have a little bit of money left, but you know what? You're gonna buy those $100 shoes because you have that emotional attachment to it. You feel like if I buy those shoes and I put them on my feet, they're gonna make me feel better, right?
yeah,
They're going to give you a sense of holiness. They're going to give you a sense of, excitement, rejuvenation, feel like, empowerment, right? And so,
right.
what I want to know is, since we're talking about, exercising self control and being calm, so how do you currently, you know, uh, are able to maintain, feelings and emotions from getting the best of you?
It's just something that you just, well, for me, it's just something that I just practice.
Hmm.
I don't, like I see things from a different perspective. Number one, it's like, do I need this thing? For example, what you were just
Right.
talking about, I'm using that as an example with the running shoes, right? Do I need it or do I want it?
Right.
And the reason I want it or I need it, what's the reason behind all that? Is it because somebody else is wearing it? Is it somebody else is influencing me? So I learned to just base my actions and just what it is that's important.
Right.
So is it important for me to have this, or is it important for me to scream, right? And who's
Right.
going to hear me if I scream, kind of thing, right? So
Right.
it's just something that I practice. in my everyday life. But
Are you still there? I can't hear you now. Oh, there it is.
yeah, are we back?
Okay. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean that's an excellent point that you mentioned is just that it's it's self-control is just the ability to prioritize things, and this is in your life and in your business like you said, is it a want or is it a need? Is really what it boils down to. And I think even then, the excitement and the emotions, tend to be very challenging, right? Because when we get very excited about something, it brings us joy, right?
Yeah,
So, but
yeah,
suddenly you're still posed with the question of, is it a want or is it a need? Is there
definitely.
something that I need to have in my life, or is it something that I want to have in my life? And I think in business, especially, as an entrepreneur, especially in your early years of entrepreneurship, you probably, at least I know when I first started my business 5 years ago, those were things that I was questioning myself every day. Was it a want or was it a need? Is this something that I need to have for my business to grow and thrive, or is it something that I want to have? Because
Definitely.
it also correlates to financial decisions too, right? Like, do I need to spend money on this, or do I want to spend money on this? Because so that's really really important. But it's so basic, right? So fundamentally basic, but it's so multifaceted and essential to everything that we do in life and in business. The ability to stay calm, self control. Always be looking for ways on how we can expand our mindset. Our perception. You mentioned perception, which could be a whole different topic that we talk about. But perception is so much of how we view life, right? Is the way we view things is what determines a lot of our actions,
Definitely.
and the way we approach things, because um, we all see things differently. So, but with that being said, I know that we can keep chatting more, and this was a phenomenal conversation, Rose. But before we sign off on the episode, can you please tell viewers and listeners, throw out some social handles, websites, ways that they can connect with you out there in the stratosphere?
Okay, so I am on Facebook, and it's Rose Young, and I'm
Okay.
on Instagram. I'm not too big on Instagram, but yeah, I'm on Instagram, and I do have a website is roseyoung .com,
Okay.
and yeah, so they can reach me and those social media links.
Awesome. Awesome, Rose. Well, I want to thank you for the great conversation. I'm a huge sucker for that. And, congratulations on the transformation that you've gone through. A
Okay.
lot of people will never experience the things that you have experienced. And it might sound cliche, but sometimes traumatic events are sort of necessary to help us push forward. It's not something that, we opt for as human beings, but traumatic events, push us forward to become the best version of ourselves. So thank you so much for the great conversation. I'm excited to see you flourish in the rest of this year and beyond.
Thank you so much. It was a